There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean, Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel, and this is a video that I do every year, but I've switched things up a bit. I usually do a video about all the releases in the coming year that I'm looking forward to, but now that I've got so many of them on my list, that would be impossible. It would be a 2-hour video, and I'd only get to talk about each book for, a couple of minutes. So, I'm giving you instead Sean's Winter 2025 most anticipated releases, and that will make a long enough video. Oh my god. I guess because I'm always searching for mystery guests or something that I'm much more attuned to what's coming, and in fact most of these are books that you've probably never heard of, which is, really my specialty. There's not very many big names here, a lot of debuts, a lot of small presses, and that is where I'm moving almost exclusively as a reader. So, within those parameters, I've got a mitload of interesting sounding books to tell you about. I have them grouped by month of publication. I don't necessarily specify whether it's being published in North America or the UK or wherever. You can look that up. I've got links to the Goodreads, but it's being published somewhere in the world during the months of January, February, and March 2025, and you can knock yourself out looking up more information. So we better get started, because I think there's, goodness, maybe 20 books, maybe more on this list. I don't know if I'm going to do another one for the spring of 2025 and so on. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But this is what I got for you now. So, January. The first one on this list is an example of a book will make the list here, but it's just sometimes because I want to do some more due diligence once it gets published, read some reviews or whatever. Not that I'm necessarily going to buy it. This one, I can't find very much out about it, but it does sound interesting. It's called Encounters with Men by Bob Ostertag. A searching memoir about his love and or sex life. I've never heard of him or the publisher. The publisher is Nomadic. Oh, he's an American musician, writer, and political activist. You probably knew that. He's still around. He's 67. Some of his music is found sound and synthesizer. The music doesn't sound at all up my street, but maybe his sex life will be. So, there's the first one. Are you still with me? Next is a novel set in India. The English Problem by Beena Kamlani. I like the cover. It's a debut. She is a former senior editor for Penguin. In this novel, her male protagonist, chosen by Gandhi to come to England for legal training and then go back to help drive the British out of India. But plot ensues, and I don't think that's actually what happens. That sounds pretty interesting. Next, Homeseeking by Karissa Chen. Set in 1940s Shanghai, childhood friendship turns into young love. And then take different life paths, but have a pivotal chance encounter on the Hong Kong ferry in 1966. Well, that sounds pretty interesting too. She is an Asian American writer who, according to her website, splits her time between New Jersey and Taipei. Here's one, The Artist by Lucy Steeds. Set in 1920 in Provence, home of the reclusive painter Tartuffe. That's a real-life painter. I think I recognize that name. He's reclusive, and a young journalist comes to interview him, and plot ensues. I love that cover. I think that's the UK cover. Lucy Steeds divides her time between London, Paris, Amsterdam, and Singapore. Odd. What's up with that? Speaking of sex lives, Edmund White has a sex memoir coming out in January, The Loves of My Life, a sex memoir. And boy, he was lucky that the loves of his life were also, the sexual encounters of his life. It doesn't usually work out that way. Anyway, I don't think we need to say anything more about it. It's coming out in January. I haven't read any of his fiction for many, many years, but I did love his memoir about reading. The Unpunished Vice, I think that was what it was called. And the last one I have for January is a Irish novel. It is called Nesting by Roisín O'Donnell, coming out in January. Set in Dublin, the female protagonist makes a split-second decision that will change everything. Takes her 2 young daughters and drives away. Plot ensues. That's it for January. February. Elegy Southwest by Madeleine Watts. This one might be more mainstream. A young married couple on a road trip through the American Southwest as they grapple with the breakdown of their relationship in the shadow of environmental collapse. Oh, I heard a bit about her previous novel, The Inland Sea. She is an Australian writer. She grew up in Sydney, sometimes Melbourne, lived in New York for a decade, now based in Berlin. Boy, these writers do a lot of gallivanting, don't they? Here's a Japanese one coming out in February. May You Have Delicious Meals by Junko Takase. Translated from the Japanese by Morgan Giles. It's set in a Japanese office and talk about a fate worse than death. The first line of the blurb, which is all I need to know, is as follows. The power dynamics of the office are never more obvious than when it comes to food. It doesn't have a very high rating, and probably that's from reviews of the Japanese language edition, but that may not mean much. Next, Human, Animal by Seth Insua. Insua? Never heard of that writer. I'm intrigued by the title and the cover. It's an ode to the wild. An elegy for what we have lost and a reproof of our society's inability to find common ground. A veteran dairy farmer. I have another book that I'm dying to read that came out in 2024 about set on a dairy farm, I think. I think it's from the UK, but this one I'm pretty sure is. Well, I don't know where. We'll find out. But anyway, veteran dairy farmer George has been struggling to keep the family business afloat. Well, that is all I need to know about that. Oh, and the author is pretty hot, I have to say. Oh my God, he's an Anglo-Spanish writer. Born in Kent in 1989. Oh, and he's gay. Oh, of course, look at that picture. Lives with his husband, David, between Newcastle upon Tyne and Madrid. I wonder if there's any writer on this list who doesn't divide their time between exotic locations. Well. Coffee Thursday? And maybe there's a gay theme to that novel. I'll find out when I read it. Speaking of gay novels, here is an Irish one that's been getting lots of buzz already. The Boy from the Sea by Garrett Carr. Comes out in February in the UK, and I've looked this up. It comes out in April in the US. And I'm quite intrigued by it. It's gotten lots of attention. Set in 1973 on Ireland's west coast. An abandoned baby. Plot ensues, and I bet that abandoned baby grows up to be the boy from the sea who, I'm guessing, will end up being on my team. It is not his debut. He has written other books. He does a little trailer for the book. I haven't watched that. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And I assume, but I don't know for sure, that he lives in Ireland, but he is an Irish writer. Robert Seethaler. He hasn't had anything come out in English for a long time. I've read 2 by him that have been, and this is his new one, The Café with No Name. Translated from the German by Katy Derbyshire. And he's an Austrian writer, and I have read and very much enjoyed A Whole Life, which is his most widely known one. And then the other one that I loved was The Tobacconist, which has one of the most luscious description of a young man's butt in all of straight male literature. I don't think Robert Seethaler is playing for my team, but he sure wrote for my team on those few pages. Anyway, what is this about? Set in the summer of '66, a man in his early 30s is opening a cafe in a poor neighborhood in Vienna. I'm not going to try to gayify this entire video, people, but the next one is very gay. It's a history of King James, James Stuart, the first of the Stuarts, and it's called Queen James. A new history about the life and loves of Britain's first king, James Stuart. I guess the first king because Britain didn't really exist until Scotland and England were joined. I never can remember that stuff. But it's by Gareth Russell, and I read his biography of the Queen Mother and loved it so much, so I have my eye on this one. That title just makes me giggle. Another Japanese title coming out in translation. This is short stories, 100 Years and a Day. 34 stories by Tomoka Shibasaki. Translated from the Japanese by Barton. Short stories from Japan. What else is there to know? I'm not sure about this one, but I'm interested to find out more. So if for no other reason that's why it's on the list, it's a memoir called Bibliophobia by Chihaya. It's a memoir of a life in literature, but kind of with the dark side. The first two lines here: books can seduce you. They can, Chihaya believes, annihilate, reveal, and provoke you. Well, yeah. Color me intrigued. Who is Chihaya? Oh, she's a book critic, essayist, and editor, and she is Japanese or Japanese American. I didn't think Chihaya was Japanese, but yes, it is, in fact. Currently a contributing editor at LA Review of Books and lives in Brooklyn. She divides her time between LA and Brooklyn. Next, a novel set in Montana. Hello, Greg! It's called Dream State by Eric Puchner. Exploration of time, grief, and love. Multi-generational. Set in Montana. I don't think I need to know anything else. If you do, you can click on the link. Eric Puchner, this is not his debut. He's had several others published. I've never heard of him. He lives in LA with his wife, the novelist Catherine Noel, who I haven't heard of either. Here's one in translation, coming out from Archipelago. And I have to say, just as a little aside, this is driving me crazy. I am a librarian at Goodreads. Back in the day, anybody that applied for it, and they kind of review your Goodreads profile to make sure you're not a freak, well, they grant you library privileges where you can add and edit entries on Goodreads. They don't allow that anymore, but I was grandfathered in. No jokes about my age. So I'm grateful for that privilege. But the Yahoo that entered this book entry on Goodreads typed the author's name in all caps, and it's driving me nuts because it won't let me fix it. I go into edit and I change it to just capital letters like it should be, and it won't take. Any other change I make, it takes, but just changing the case, it won't recognize that. It's just driving me around the bend. Anyway, here it is. All right, well, I got so wound up about that I forgot to tell you the title, even the author. I did mention the author and the translator a little bit later, but here it is up front. I can't find any help with the pronunciation of one word. I think it's a place name in the title, so I'll do my best. It's called People from Oetimu by Felix Nesi, translated from the Indonesian by Lara Norgard. And just for fun, here is the screenshot of the Goodreads page, the all caps of Felix Nesi. Arrgh! This is set in Timor. Set in 1998, men living on the border between West and East Timor. It opens with them watching. They're gathered at the police station to watch the World Cup. The next, The Boyhood of Cain by Michael Amherst. Another queer novel. A young boy comes of age in the heart of England, in a small village. He has published a memoir called Go the Way Your Blood Beats on truth, bisexuality, and desire. Huh. I don't know where he lives now, but he's a UK writer. That's last month I'm going to cover in this video, March. Oh, and I'm so excited about this. Tori Peters has a new book coming out, Stag Dance, a novel and stories. Now, I don't like stories and a novel put in the same volume. That drives me nuts, but it's Tori Peters. She can do whatever she wants. Oh, I guess one novel and 3 novellas. No, each novella should have its own volume. But the novel, Stag Dance, features Paul Bunyan-type lumberjack, recounting how the lonely woodsmen entertain themselves with a dance at which some of the loggers must volunteer to attend as women. Her debut novel, The Transition Baby, is one of the best works of literature published so far this century. A Japanese novel that sounds absolutely freaking fascinating. It's called Hunchback by Sao Ichikawa, translated from the Japanese by Barton. The protagonist was born with a congenital muscle disorder, uses a wheelchair and ventilator, and lives in a care home and studies, tweets indignantly, and posts outrageous stories on an erotica website. I'm in love. 5 stars premise. Abdulrazak Gurna has a new novel coming out in March called Theft. I loved his last one, Afterlives, and had a fabulous pseudo-buddy read chat with Roz and Tilly about it. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And this one, it's the first one he's published since winning the Nobel Prize in 2021. 3 young people coming of age in Tanzania at the turn of the 21st century. Next is a debut novel from a French writer, Claire Baglin, born in Normandy. And this cover reminds me of a Burger King ad. Maybe that's intentional. It's called On the Clock. And it's translated from the French by Jordan Stump. A family saga, a penetrating picture of social inequality. Oh, I was right. It is Burger King or something like that, because one of the 2 storylines is the 20-year-old narrator's summer job at a fast food franchise. I am excited about the second novel by a Palestinian Newfoundlander writer whose debut I haven't read yet, but I'm just so excited that there is a Palestinian Newfoundlander writer in the world that I'm excited by anything she might do, and she's queer. This is called My Thievery of the People by Layla Marshy. And this is a collection of short stories, actually, which are set from the highways of Cairo to the outports of Newfoundland, and to the deceptive perils of the Quebec countryside. My goodness. What a title, what a cover. Last, but certainly not least, because I'm really excited about this one, this is a queer Welsh novella, I believe, coming out in March. A Room Above a Shop by Anthony Chaplin. A very modest title and cover, and it just intrigues me. 2 quiet men form a tentative connection, unfolding in South Wales over 3 years during the decade of Section 28, the age of consent debate, and against the backdrop of the HIV and AIDS crisis. That just sounds amazing. Can't wait to read that. So that, lovely people, is my most anticipated releases from the winter of 2025. Do any of these sound appealing to you? Thanks for watching.